Today's session is going to be quite interesting as we have a speaker on board that is part of our cooperation with Hofstede Insights. It's going to be presented by Mark, who's representative of Chint Global. That's also the sponsor for this program. Goodmorning BSN is meant to give you practical insights surrounding the 4 pillars of great leadership. Today's pillar that is central in our meeting is going to be about decision-making leadership. And the topic we are going to talk about is accelerating new energy. For today's speakers, we have 2 great people on board. Presenting today is Mark van Rij. As spoken about, he's from Chint Global. And as a reflector today, we have Sam de Vries from Business School Netherlands. Hopefully, there are some questions afterwards. So after the presentations of the 2 people, in that case, please put your questions into the chat or otherwise raise your hand so I can give you the audience and enable you to state your question. This program is especially made for BSN alumni, but also for managers, directors, and executives all over the world, which gives it a bit of a different time frame for everybody. But in Dutch time, in Central European summertime, it's going to be, it starts at exactly 8 o'clock, and we're going to end this session at exactly 8:53. That will give you, let's say, the space to get back to your working station, start off your day, and hopefully use the practical insights that this session has brought you today. Please give yourself an introduction, Mark and Sam. We start with the presentation of Mark. Mark, please go ahead.
Thank you. I will unmute myself first. Would you like the extended version and the introduction to Chint, or just a short introduction for myself? I'll do it shortly.
Do it both.
Yeah, Mark van Rij. I'm actually at the moment head of business development for the United Kingdom for Chint Solar. And Chint Solar is a solar developer and producer in a global solar developer and producer. I'll tell a little bit more about that later on. My background is purely in renewable energy development, wind farms and solar farms, and I've developed those in various countries in the world since 2005.
Good morning, my name is Sam de Vries, Manager Business Development for Business School Netherlands. And I'm talking to a lot of managers and corporates also about these topics. So I would like to go with Mark and see if we can reflect on this energy transition market. And yeah, let's make it a good presentation. Well, Mark, go ahead.
Right, then, well, maybe we could just start with the first slide. I'm just struggling with my Zoom, but there we go. Just as an introduction to Chint Solar, Chint is a global player in renewable energy, primarily the production of solar modules, so solar panels that you see all around the world on rooftops and on land. And Chint also produces electrical equipment, batteries, and as of recently also electrolyzers. Is a big player in China. We have about 12 billion turnover at the moment and 40,000 employees. And in Europe, we are 55 strong now, which is we're growing quite quickly. And we are primarily developing solar farms, so solar parks. That's big fields full of solar panels that you may have seen. And in that market, we have been the first company in the Netherlands. And I used to be heading up the Dutch business. We built the largest solar farm in the Netherlands, and it's the first one that was also connected to the transmission grid. So that's a very high voltage grid. It's a very complicated way of connecting a solar farm, so we were quite unique, and we only did that with a very small group of people. So it was it is a very interesting period for us, and I think decision-making leadership was key in that process. We invested on that project about 10 to 15 million at an early stage, at risk, which actually that decision made the project actually work and connect in time and sort of pay itself back over the years. So there's a lot that we're doing. We're also the first company in the Netherlands to create our own electricity network, connecting 13 solar farms in different locations to each other, to a single connection to the electricity grid. So we are gathering a lot of knowledge and experience in developing these solar farms. And as of recently, Chint is becoming, or is already, the largest independent power producer, which means that we own solar farms primarily in China, but also solar panels on roofs of residential homes, and making us the largest producer of renewable energy in the world. So that's a couple of really big steps that we're taking globally. Now, reflecting on sort of the new energy world, we see here the first slide. Maybe we can go to the next slide. That's a bit of an introduction to how the world looks like, and it's a world of big numbers. I think we've seen recently with, especially Europe has been hit quite hard with high gas prices, which resulted actually in a global energy crisis. Everyone is looking for liquid natural gas to replace gas from Russia. Every country in the world is looking for alternatives at the moment, and that has resulted in the growth of installed renewable power to double in the next 5 years. And I mean, just to say that's the entire power capacity of China today, that needs to be, or that is going to be installed in the next 5 years. And as I said, due to the fluctuations in the power markets and war in Ukraine, this is 50% higher than the amount of growth that was forecasted last year. So we can see that these global events and even more local events have a huge effect on everyone worldwide. Currently, the growth has been driven by the three countries with huge populations: US, India, and China. All three are coming with improved policies, which will allow renewables to be built out at increased rate. Can we have the next slide then, please? So if we look at the power market and where everything is shifting towards, also in terms of renewables, is that everyone is securing their own energy sources within their own countries. So countries are looking more and more to create and have their own sustainable renewable energy and power in country, to make sure that you're not going to be too dependent on other countries in order to produce your own electricity and energy. But in line with that, we would need to have raw materials as well in order to produce this renewable energy. There's actually a couple that are quite interesting. Lithium is a very interesting one, and cobalt for batteries. Cobalt can be found in Africa. And we see various countries sort of slowly descending upon Africa to start to secure rare materials such as cobalt. The other one is rare earth materials. Those are they're called rare earth materials because they're not that much of it. But they're used in the chip industry, but they're also used in the generators for wind turbines, for instance, and in batteries as well. And China and the United States have got the biggest reserves of rare earth materials. So there will be a lot of pressure on these raw materials to be harvested and used in technology, which gives already a very interesting power balance if you look at how various countries across the world are and regions are acting. And on top of that, the use of electricity will increase significantly. So what we see is that, for instance, in Europe, the use of electrical vehicles is increasing significantly, but also heating and other energy use in industry is changing from gas and hydrogen to green hydrogen. And green hydrogen means that you use renewable energy to produce hydrogen. At the moment, gas is used primarily and coal as well. But we're looking at using renewable electricity for that. And as big industry needs to change towards a cleaner way of energy usage, that will be a huge market in the future. And the other one is, of course, the one thing that's influencing the market is the increase in population as well, and the increase in consumption. We use more water, we eat more food, because there's just more mouths to feed, comfort as well. And we see actually that climate change has an effect on that. We see the increase of numbers of air conditioning units being used worldwide because of the increase in temperature. So we feel it all around us, the effects of climate change and the need to increase renewable energy generation. Can I go to the next slide, please? I'm just looking at time as well. Yep. So what we will see is that we're looking at pressure also on land. So for instance, in Europe, there's a luxury of being able to use the sea for offshore wind generation, for instance. But in other parts of the world, there is less capacity for that due to the fact that there's lower wind and lower wind energy, actually. So in other parts of the world, for Africa, for instance, but also Asia and South America, there's going to be more pressure on land. So the land use is going to change. That's going to put communities under pressure, because you're going to see an effect on your local environment in terms of energy generation, whether it's going to be solar farms, whether it's going to be wind farms, whether it's actually going to be mining for raw materials. It's all going to have an effect on land use, which is going to get tighter and tighter because of population increases. And everyone is also looking at roughly the same areas for energy generation and for living. So there's a requirement as well to look at the best areas for deployment. Now, I just mentioned it already. Offshore wind is highly effective in the North Sea, for instance. So in Europe, offshore, also offshore the coast of US and China and Taiwan. But if you look at solar, the solar belt, which runs actually straight across Africa, Oman, for instance, is a country where there's huge potential for solar. That's where we feel that solar will be deployed in the future at very large scale. So you will see that in such areas, we will have very large generation to produce hydrogen locally, ship the hydrogen off to areas where there's less potential for solar energy, and power the industry, for instance. So we will see in the future hydrogen being produced in Africa, being shipped off to the Rotterdam port, for instance, in the Netherlands, and used by heavy industry in Germany, France, the Netherlands, etc. The other then important item would be what we describe is the local generation, because local communities will be noticing the large-scale generation, and it will have an effect on them. But if you still want the community, and it's happening in Africa quite a lot already, is going completely off-grid. So you're not connected to the electricity grid, and you produce all your electricity and energy where you live. not being dependent on anyone else. That's a shift that we're going to see as well. And that's not only going to be in Africa, that's going to be in Asia, it's going to be in South America, potentially less so in Europe, but even Europe needs to look at generating locally in order to power locally. So there's a couple of shifts coming, and the shifts are going towards large-scale energy generation to power, the world's industries, and we're going to look at we're going to see smaller scale local energy generation to power locally, to power the local consumers and potentially even local companies. That's what we as Chint see happening in the world. And we're preparing also for that change. We're already looking at big projects in Africa, in Mauritania and Morocco to invest in. Those will be solar projects that would convert the electricity into hydrogen. So those are projects that we're currently looking at in order to prepare for this new energy world that we're looking at.
Okay.
So I think I stuck to my time relatively okay.
You're right on the spot, Mark. So thank you a lot. Let's hand it over to Sam to reflect on what you said.
All right. As I can see, Chint is making big steps, and Mark, thank you for your vision on what you're doing. These are very visionary plans, and also taking stands in this energy transition. So my compliments on how you're doing that. I also looked at the global energy landscape and how it's going to undertake a rapid transformation. And it has to, because we have to go towards a cleaner and more sustainable sources of energy. This shift is driven by a combination of factors, as you mentioned, including environmental concerns, technology advancements, and involving also consumer preferences. But corporate managers and governments play a critical role, of course, in this energy transition, but often encounters resistance and challenges along the way. And we think that corporate managers and government leaders, in order to make decision-making leadership as a crucial aspect of acceleration in this energy transition, that we have to understand the complexities of this energy transition. And to effectively, excuse me for my language, to effectively lead in this changing market, it is too important that it has to be situational aware and understand the signs of these times. So you mentioned, for instance, when we have to develop in certain regions, because are the best climate regions to develop, we have to do that. But also data and demographic areas are very important to take account of. So this involves recognizing the urgency and importance of this transition, and also local influences. And staying informed about the latest science and technologies is also very important. And so when we need to know about these very important breakthroughs on, let's say, technology trends, and also leaders need to know about it, because if we don't know about it, we can't put that into mind. But in the face of resistance, it's also crucial for leaders to effectively communicate and resist in this energy transition, and benefits also to various stakeholders. And if we can't cope with this resistance and communication, we can't get any further. You also told us a lot of local people and a lot of local influences are repelled to these, how do you say it, decisions. And we need to build consensus and overcome these resistances to get further. Collaboration and engagement are also key for a successful energy transition. And what you do and have accomplished in the Netherlands and in Europe, but also in a lot of countries, is very impressive, because a lot of projects are realized. So you have a lot of experience on that, and that's a good thing to see. But in order to share it together, and we need to do that, we need also to keep in touch with each other, and let's say, share the knowledge you have gained on these kind of, projects. So what I can see in this energy transition and accelerating on these topics is that pioneers like Chint and pioneers like a lot of people in this market make sure that the transition is rapidly evolving, but also knowledge and education and sharing knowledge on these topics are very important. And the way we do it is really to, let's say, collaborate on these topics with students and people around it and big corporates and governments. And effectively communicating together is one of the most important things to achieve acceleration in the energy market. So, Twan, if there are any questions.
Yep, people, let's go. So you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or otherwise come through the chat box. I'm receiving messages from Dr. Wilson, but not really a question. And then there's Pascal, a BSN student in construction at Newman. And they are running a 1.3 megawatt solar metro grid in DR Congo and have secured our Series B funds on Friday for additional 13.5 megawatts projects across the country. The main concern he's stating about is with the increase of production of solar panels, inverters, etc., which will have a lifespan of 25 years. Is there a waste management plan for all of these produced equipment? Mark, can you answer that question?
Yes, yes, there is, but it's very dependent on the market you're operating in. Indeed, waste management has not been looked after very well within the renewables industry. We see that wind farm blades have to be sort of buried underground of decommissioned wind farms. Now, solar panels actually can now last for certainly 40 years and potentially even 50 years. It's just not that you get guarantees for such a long time. Europe is actually getting a waste recycling program up at the moment. So you pay a little, takes into account recycling. And I believe that up to 98% of a panel can be recycled. But it is indeed a question on projects that are already going up and already running, how waste is going to be dealt with. So I'm unsure how that works in Congo at the moment, but there could be the next sort of level problem could indeed be waste management in the future.
Thank you. Another question for you, I think, from John Lodder. He's stating, I see regular investments in solar and wind of about 100 to 200 million in Eastern Balkans, especially Romania and Macedonia, Croatia, Western Balkan. What is the role part in the huge market that Mark talked about for these parts of the world?
Well, if we look at these type of projects, they are of a scale that they would contribute actually to the local energy usage, because there are indeed huge investments that go into these areas. But if you look at energy use within countries, it will probably be covering up to 15, maybe 20% of actually energy usage in the countries. I would classify that almost as local generation. Now there's a bit of a difference between what's local and local, and what I was referring to in my presentation. Something we see, for instance, happening in the Netherlands, but also other countries, that due to resistance, local people are getting more engaged in renewable energy generation, and that's where we need, very good decisive leadership, also from communities, but also from local government and from the investment community. But if you look at these skills, it's sort of, I would almost call it mid-scale. It's necessary to make the local electricity grid greener. But if certainly countries in the Balkans that have no opportunity for offshore wind, for instance, they will need to start importing electricity in the future, and then you're talking about billions of investment.
Thank you. Another question from Rumindu Doka. He's asking, and I think this is a question that Sam can answer, what's being done regarding the ESGs, so the environmental, social and governance issues that solar energy service providers, or perhaps Mark can join in. So what's being done regarding the environmental, social and governance issues by solar energy services?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, because environmental, social and governance in Europe is taking into the law, and that's a reporting directive. And what you see is that companies now are facing a big change in their way how they buy in energy in their own company, because they have to report it for the law. I don't know how that relates to solar companies taking care of it, because they are providers, but the ESG and also the law in the Netherlands clearly says that you have to make a transition on also the energy transition. So the demand on green energy is raising from the market.
You want to elaborate on that, Mark?
Well, I concur. Actually, it's the biggest solar conference in Europe. Intersolar was a couple of weeks ago in Munich, and ESG was one of the key topics that was discussed there as well. I think that companies are indeed taking their not only their legal responsibility, because there are some countries where it's not the legal responsibility, but you still want to take the responsibility as a company to have your ESG in order. So for us, it's top priority as well to make sure that we comply.
Okay, thank you. So people, if you want to ask your question, please put it into the chat box or raise your hand, so I can give you the word. For now, Mark, I have a question. So this session is about accelerating new energy, but it surrounds the topic of decision making. At one point in time, or even now today, it's important that a company makes a decision on the right time. There's alternatives to solar, there's alternatives to what is your process of making those decisions? So starting up the company, being successful, being the largest producer of renewable energy today.
It's actually looking at the future, and it's a bit of crystal ball, sort of glazing at the crystal ball, but it's using our experience in this relatively young market to see where these markets are moving towards, and to see what the patterns are of the patterns of consumption, but also the social patterns. And especially the last one is important, I believe, because in the past, when you look at the power industry, it was quite a simple industry, huge power stations, central locations, power lines running out, and that was it. And if we look at the market now, we need to look at not at today, we need to look at 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And that is helping us as a company to prepare for the future. So if we look at for me, a close market to United Kingdom, we see that there are significant issues on the electricity grid. It's going to take 10 to 15 years to get the electricity grid up to speed to handling renewable energy. And we are already looking at developing and investing in areas where we know that it will take 8-9 years, maybe 10 years to actually start, building and connecting our solar farms in those areas. So it's looking ahead and trying to anticipate what markets do based on the knowledge that we have in each market. But yeah, it remains to be quite it does remain to be quite a challenge, though, because these power markets because it's relatively easy to build a solar farm and to take it forward in countries where there's supportive policy. So what you do tend to see happening is that it comes as a wave. So people go to a country with positive policies. You see people from all over the world pouring into the company or in the country, developing projects. Then the landscape is quiet again for a couple of years, and then the next wave comes. So it's sometimes quite difficult to anticipate on those events.
Thank you, Mark. I see new people coming in. We only have got like 7 or 8 minutes left. So if you got any questions for Mark or Sam, please put them into the chat box. I've got 2 questions in the chat box already. The first one is from Sam to Mark, I guess. And it states, in the face of resistance, is it crucial for leaders to effectively communicate to various stakeholders to achieve the same or personal needs? And can you tell us how you would cope with that in the former projects that you've done?
Yes, it's a very interesting topic, because resistance comes because people see things happening in their personal environment and cannot directly relate to the project that's being built versus what it actually deals with. So you see that projects start to become difficult if, for instance, there was a local thing in the Netherlands where a local politician was not really fussed about climate change, because in his province nothing was happening, and at the same time in the south of the Netherlands, lots of places were flooding. It was last year in Limburg. And you see that there's that people think very locally, and if you look at where the effects are of renewable or of climate change, then people will understand a bit more. But then again, how do you deal with the resistance? Because people I can imagine that if you are in Africa and you see all these big projects arise, and you don't locally benefit from it, you will also start to get resistance. And that is happening, as I said earlier, in China already, but you can see that happening in the future in Africa as well. So how do you deal with it? Keep it local and keep your stakeholders involved in the process. So whether you are coming from the investment or from the community or from local government or regional government, make sure that people understand why projects are there. Make sure that they understand why they are in the area and give them a role to play in the process of developing such projects. We see that in various countries where people are getting a role, a well-defined role, whether it's in project design, whether it is in ideas to combine agriculture and solar generation. People start to understand that they can also benefit from a project, whether it's from by looking at it, it looks more pretty, or even financially benefit from it by having lower electricity bills, for instance. That's where you start to get people to understand why these projects are happening and why they're happening in their areas.
In line with that, a question from Annette Nijs. How do you see the African market for Chint in solar or wind or other new energy forms, who are currently the main players in Africa?
The main players are, well, it sounds terrible, but it's still the oil companies, actually. If you look at the size of investment that's required in, for instance, let's say a 10 to 15 gigawatt solar farm and electrolyzers, you're looking at billions of dollars of investment. And so how I can see Africa grow is through various ways. I think the main one will be large scale deployment of renewables, wind and solar, by the larger utility companies and oil companies, because they need to diversify as well in terms of energy production. But I also see in Africa more and more local projects coming. And that is, I think that's the biggest challenge for Africa as a continent, to make sure that the investment community is ready to invest locally and to have the trust to invest locally. And whether that's with World Bank backing, for instance, in first instance, that will be a great step forward, to have secured loans to develop these projects, but also to have the trust in the local communities to be able to contribute.
Thank you. So we have only got like 3 minutes left, but I would like to ask you the last 3 questions that are in the chat box. First, you are being welcomed to Congo, Mark. So that's the first remark. Country has big potential for solar energy. And Pascal is happy to announce that Nuor has secured a 40 million additional investment on Friday, and will achieve getting in an additional 28 million by the end of the month. And then Olu Kayode is stating Africa has bountiful solar energy potential, since they are the belt of the tropical belt of the world. And the question is, how open are you to collaborations to set up companies in Nigeria and other African countries, or perhaps to train other solar professionals over here? And do you currently have plans that go in that direction?
Yes, Chint does have plans to go in that direction, and I think certainly the notion of training other solar professionals, I think, is a very important one, because if you look at projects locally, you will need expertise as well. And the expertise is obviously not going to come from the local community. It's not coming from the local community in the Netherlands, and it will not happen in Africa either. So we will have to train people locally to be able to set up these projects. For collaborations in Nigeria, definitely. Actually, already 10-12 years ago, I've looked at a project in Nigeria and across River State, with a UK government, with UKTI, UK Trade and Investment. Unfortunately, that did not come off the ground because of various reasons, but I also do think that the community wasn't ready yet at the time. But now, if you look at indeed the future of having locally trained people that understand what they're doing, then there's a good opening also for European investors, for instance, to start investing in projects in Africa.
Makes sense. Then the last question, and please give me a short answer because we're running out of time.
Sure.
And that is the cost of solar power energy systems seems to be high. So what can be done to make it affordable?
It's already going down. It was high due to a very high price for polysilicium, but that price is going down very, very significantly. To make it more affordable, I would say increase the deployment of solar. The more solar will be deployed worldwide, the more chance there is for the price to go down. And that has happened because it's more than halved in price, the systems, of the last 10 years.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sam. So we come to an end of this Good Morning BSN. It's 8:53, so we have to close down. There's more questions in the chat room. Perhaps you can answer them over the chat later on, but at least we have shared the presentation of today. Would like to invite you all to our BSN Good Morning BSN session next week, starting at 8 o'clock Central European time. Again, with a new topic that will provide new insights. Thank you for participating today, and hope to see you back next week or in the weeks coming. Thank you so much.